Sometimes doing the right thing costs you everything. For 19-year-old Zaire Jackson, it cost him his dream job at the Barclays Center when he broke the rules to help NBA superstar Kevin Durant. One simple choice: giving Durant a pair of shoes to protect his injured ankle. And Zaire's world crumbled. No job meant no way to pay for his sick grandmother's medicine. No chance to finish his night classes. No hope for the future he'd worked so hard to build. But what Zaire didn't know was that his moment of integrity had set something bigger in motion. Something his father had put in place years ago. Something that would change not just his life, but the lives of hundreds of kids in his Brooklyn neighborhood. All he had to do was make the right choice, even if it meant losing everything first. Zaire Jackson's hands trembled as he polished the last basketball of the day. The smooth leather felt like pure gold under his fingertips. Even after 3 months as a junior equipment manager at the Barclays Center, he still couldn't believe this was his job. Every morning, he got to walk through those giant glass doors, flash his employee badge, and step into the place where dreams came true. "You missed a spot," Marcus called from across the equipment room, tossing him a fresh cleaning cloth. "Can't have the pros playing with dirty balls, right?" Zaire caught the cloth with his free hand and grinned. "Man, without you getting me this job, I'd still be stocking shelves at that corner store." He gave the ball one final wipe before placing it carefully in the rack with the others. Each one gleamed like a tiny sun under the fluorescent lights. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from his grandmother. "Took my medicine, baby. Don't worry about me. Focus on your work. Love you." Zaire's smile faded slightly. He quickly typed back, "Love you too, Gran. I'll pick up your prescription refill on the way home." The prescription that cost more than he made in 2 days. But he'd figure it out. He always did. "Your grandmother doing okay?" Marcus asked, reading his expression. They'd been best friends since 3rd grade. Marcus could read him like a book. "She says she is." Zaire shrugged, trying to sound casual. "You know Gran. She'd say she was fine if the house was on fire. Just like she'd said she was fine the night they got the news about his parents." Zaire had been 14, sitting at the IAU kitchen table doing homework when the police officers came. Car accident. Instant. No suffering. All those empty words people say when your world falls apart. Gran had held him all night, her tiny frame somehow strong enough to contain his grief. She'd never once let him see her cry. The next morning, she'd made his favorite breakfast, French toast with extra cinnamon, and said, "We keep moving forward, baby. That's what your daddy would want." The memory of his father brought a familiar ache. James Jackson had been the one who first put a basketball in his hands, who taught him that sports wasn't just about winning, it was about character. "Remember, son," he'd say, demonstrating the perfect follow-through on a jump shot, "in life, just like in basketball, it's not about being perfect, it's about doing what's right, even when it's hard." A loud clang from the storage area snapped. Zaire back to the present. The evening cleaning crew had arrived, which meant his shift was almost over. "Hey, you coming to night classes tonight?" Marcus asked, hanging up his equipment manager vest. Zaire shook his head. "Not tonight. Need to pick up Gran's meds and work on some job applications." "More applications? Bro, you already have a job." "Yeah, but junior equipment manager barely covers the rent. I need something else, part-time." He didn't mention that. The latest medical bills had wiped out what little savings they had. Or that he'd been eating ramen for dinner so Gran could have proper meals. Marcus frowned. "You're already working 40 hours here, plus helping your grandmother, plus trying to study sports management. You need to sleep sometime." "Sleep is for the weak," Zaire joked, but his shoulders sagged with exhaustion. The truth was, he was tired. Bone-deep tired. The kind of tired that made your soul ache. But what choice did he have? He gathered his things, said goodbye to Marcus, and headed for the employee exit. As he walked through the arena, he paused for a moment to look out at the empty court. The polished wood gleamed under the dimmed lights, and he could almost hear the phantom roar of the crowd, the squeak of sneakers, the swish of the net. His father used to bring him to games here, way up in the nosebleed seats where the players looked like ants. But it hadn't mattered. They were there, breathing the same air as their heroes. His dad would point to the court and say, "See that, Zaire? That's where magic happens." But the real magic? It happens in the small moments, the choices we make when nobody's watching. Now, here he was, on the other side of those moments, making minimum wage, sure, but he was part of it, part of something bigger than himself. As he pushed through the exit doors into the cool evening air, his phone buzzed again. Another text from Gran. "Found an old photo of your daddy today. He'd be so proud of you, baby. So proud." Zaire blinked back sudden tears. He hoped she was right. Some days, it felt like he was barely holding everything together with scotch tape and wishes. But then he'd remember what his father always said about integrity, about doing what's right. And somehow, that made the load a little lighter. He walked to the subway station, his employee badge bouncing against his chest with each step. Tomorrow would be another day of polishing basketballs, organizing equipment, and living his dream, even if the dream looked a little different than he'd imagined. But that was okay. He was exactly where he needed to be, or at least, that's what he thought. He had no idea that tomorrow would change everything. The next morning arrived with a mix of rain and thunder that matched Zaire's mood. He'd stayed up late helping Gran with her breathing exercises, and now his eyes felt like they were full of sand. But as he swiped his employee badge at the Barclays Center's staff entrance, the familiar buzz of excitement pushed through his exhaustion. Today was different. Today was Kevin Durant's first practice back after his minor injury. "Heads up!" Marcus called as Zaire entered the equipment room. "KD's showing up early. Coach wants everything perfect." Zaire's heart skipped. Durant had always been his father's favorite player. "He showed that being tall and skinny doesn't mean you can't be strong," Dad used to say, nudging Zaire's own lanky shoulder. They worked faster than usual, making sure every ball was polished, every towel perfectly folded. Zaire had just finished organizing the practice jerseys when he heard voices in the hallway. His hands froze mid-fold as Kevin Durant's distinctive voice carried through the door. "Man, these shoes aren't feeling right," KD was saying to someone. "Ankles still a little tender." Zaire peeked through the equipment room window. Durant was walking with one of the trainers, a slight frown on his face as he looked down at his worn practice shoes. The superstar's limp was barely noticeable, but Zaire caught it, probably because he'd watched every KD highlight video 1,000 times. "Want me to tape it up extra?" the trainer asked. "Nah, let me try to work through it," Durant replied, disappearing into the practice court. Zaire's stomach twisted as he watched through the giant windows. Durant was moving carefully during warm-ups, testing his ankle with each step. Something wasn't right. He could see it in the way the player shifted his weight, in the slight hesitation before each jump shot. "He's pushing too hard," Marcus muttered, coming up beside him. "You can see it in his face." Zaire nodded, then remembered something. "Wait here," he said, hurrying to the back storage room. There, on the top shelf, was what he'd seen yesterday while doing inventory, a brand new pair of Durant's signature shoes still in the box. They were meant for next week's charity event. technically not supposed to be touched until then. His father's voice echoed in his head. The real magic happens in the choices we make when nobody's watching. But this wasn't his choice to make. The shoes were tagged for the charity event. Using them now would break at least 3 different protocols. He could lose his job. Through the window, he watched Durant wince after a layup. The memory of his father's voice came again, stronger this time. Doing what's right, even when it's hard. Zaire grabbed the shoebox. "What are you doing?" Marcus hissed, as Zaire walked purposefully toward the practice court. "Those are for the charity event. You can't—" But Zaire was already pushing through the doors. His heart hammered against his ribs as he approached Durant, who was sitting on the bench, retying his laces for the 3rd time. "Mr. Durant?" Zaire's voice cracked slightly. He cleared his throat and tried again. "I noticed you were having trouble with your shoes. These might help." He held out the box, hands trembling slightly. "They're your size. Fresh cushioning. Better support for your ankle." Durant looked up, surprised. His eyes moved from Zaire's face to the box, then back again. "You work here?" "Yes, sir. Junior equipment manager." Zaire swallowed hard. "I know these are supposed to be for next week's event, but sometimes doing what's right means breaking the rules." The words tumbled out before he could stop them, his father's wisdom speaking through him. Something flickered in Durant's eyes. Surprise, maybe recognition, but it passed so quickly, Zaire thought he must have imagined it. "What's your name?" Durant asked, taking the box. Zaire Jackson." Durant's hands paused for a fraction of a second as he opened the box. "Jackson," he repeated softly, almost to himself. Then he looked up with a small smile. "Thanks, Zaire." Zaire nodded and hurried back to the equipment room, his heart still racing. Through the window, he watched Durant change into the new shoes. The player's movement immediately looked smoother, more confident. The slight favor in his step disappeared. "I can't believe you just did that," Marcus said, shaking his head. "Those shoes were logged for the charity event. There are cameras everywhere." "I know." Zaire's stomach churned. "But he needed them. You saw him struggling." "Yeah, but it was the right thing to do." Zaire squared his shoulders, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Sometimes, that's all that matters." The rest of the day passed in a blur. Durant had an amazing practice, moving like his old self. Nobody said anything about the shoes. By closing time, Zaire had almost convinced himself everything would be okay. He was wrong. As he packed up his things, his supervisor's voice crackled over the radio. "Jackson, my office. Now." Zaire's heart sank. He caught Marcus's worried look as he headed toward the office, his feet feeling like they were made of lead. The security camera footage was already playing on the supervisor's computer screen when he walked in. There he was, clear as day, bringing Durant the shoes. Breaking protocol. Breaking rules. He thought of his grandmother, the rent, the medical bills, the night classes he could barely afford. But somewhere, underneath the fear, he felt something else. A quiet certainty. His father would have done the same thing. The supervisor looked up from the screen, his face unreadable. "Sit down, Zaire. We need to talk." And in that moment, Zaire knew his life was about to change forever. He just didn't know how much. "Do you understand what you did wrong?" Mr. Peterson, the supervisor, folded his hands on his desk. The security footage played on a loop behind him, showing Zaire handing the shoes to Durant over and over again. I was trying to help, Zaire said quietly. His ankle was being monitored by our professional training staff. Mr. Peterson's voice wasn't angry, just tired. We have protocols for a reason, Zaire. Those shoes were logged for the charity event. They were part of our inventory. You essentially gave away company property without authorization. Each word felt like a stone dropping into Zaire's stomach. I can pay for them, he offered, even though they both knew his salary wouldn't cover even half the cost. This isn't about the shoes' cost. Mr. Peterson sighed, pulling out a form from his desk drawer. It's about trust, about following established procedures. What if those shoes had been defective? What if Durant had injured himself wearing unauthorized equipment? The liability alone. The door burst open. Marcus stood there, out of breath. Mr. Peterson, wait! It was my idea. I told Zaire to... Marcus, Mr. Peterson cut him off. Get back to work. This doesn't concern you. But it does. Zaire's only been here 3 months. He didn't know. He signed the same protocols you did. Mr. Peterson's voice was firm. Please close the door on your way out. Marcus looked at Zaire helplessly. Zaire gave him a small shake of the head. He couldn't let his friend take the fall for his decision. After Marcus left, Mr. Peterson slid the form across the desk. Termination. Papers. The words blurred as Zaire stared at them. Zero-tolerance policy, Mr. Peterson said, almost gently. I'm sorry, Zaire. You seem like a good kid, but rules are rules. Zaire's hands shook as he signed the paper. All he could think about was Gran's medicine, the rent, his night classes, everything crumbling like a house of cards. You'll need to clean out your locker, Mr. Peterson said. Security will escort you out. The walk to his locker felt like a dream, a nightmare. Marcus tried to talk to him, but Zaire couldn't hear the words over the roaring in his ears. He opened his locker, staring at the few personal items inside. A photo of him with Gran, his father's old Nets cap, a basketball card Kevin Durant had signed years ago at a mall event. This isn't right, Marcus kept saying. You were helping. Durant had an amazing practice because of those shoes. Everyone saw it. Doesn't matter. Zaire's voice sounded hollow even to himself. Dad always said doing the right thing comes with a price. Guess this is mine. He stuffed everything into his backpack, hands moving automatically. The employee badge felt heavy as he unpinned it from his shirt. 3 months. That's all he'd gotten of his dream job. The security guard waited patiently by the door. He was one of the nice ones, Tommy, who always shared his coffee on early morning shifts. Keep your head up, kid, Tommy said quietly as they walked to the exit. Sometimes life has a funny way of working out, but Zaire couldn't see how. Not now. Not with Gran's bills piling up and his classes slipping away and everything he'd worked for vanishing in an instant. At the door, he turned for one last look at the arena. Through the practice court windows, he could see Durant shooting free throws, moving smoothly in the new shoes. At least he'd helped someone today, even if it had cost him everything. Marcus caught up with him outside. Wait, let me talk to my uncle. He knows people. We can fix this. There's nothing to fix. Zaire managed a weak smile. I made a choice. Now I have to live with it. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained gray and heavy with clouds. Zaire walked toward the subway station, Marcus's protests fading behind him. His phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in his pocket. How was he going to tell Gran? He thought of her sitting in their small apartment, probably working on her crossword puzzle, completely unaware that their world had just shifted on its axis. She'd tell him it would be okay. She always did. But this time, He wasn't so sure. As he swiped his Metro card, his phone buzzed. Probably Marcus again. But when he looked at the screen, his heart stopped. It was a number he didn't recognize, with a message that would change everything. "Your father taught me about integrity, too." Zaire stared at the message until the subway doors closed, nearly catching his backpack. His fingers hovered over the phone screen, trembling slightly. Who could have sent this? How did they know about his father? Before he could reply, the train plunged into darkness, and he lost signal. Just as well. He had no idea what to say back. His father had been a youth basketball coach, working with hundreds of kids over the years. But something about that message felt different. Personal. The subway car rattled and swayed as rejection. Emails kept popping up on his phone whenever they passed through areas with service. "Thank you for your interest, but we've decided to go with other candidates. Unfortunately, the position has been filled. We'll keep your application on file." Each one felt like another tiny crack in his heart. He'd applied to 27 jobs last night while Gran was sleeping. Security guard positions, retail stores, anything that might help keep them afloat. Now, sitting in the fluorescent glare of the subway car, watching his hopes disappear one email at a time, reality started to sink in. His phone buzzed again. "Marcus? Bro, something weird is happening. News reporters asking about you. Stories getting out." Zaire's stomach clenched. Great. Now everyone would know about his failure. He turned off his phone, not ready to deal with any of it. The train emerged from the tunnel, sunlight flashing across his face. 2 more stops until home. His hands found his father's old Nets cap in his backpack, fingers running over the worn brim. Dad had worn it to every game he coached, saying it brought good luck. "Some luck," Zaire muttered. When he finally reached their apartment building, he paused in the stairwell. Through the thin walls, he could hear Gran's cough, the deep, rattling kind that had been getting worse lately. The kind that needed the expensive medicine he couldn't afford anymore. He took a deep breath and opened their door. Gran was sitting in her favorite chair by the window, an old photo album open on her lap. She looked up with a smile that quickly faded when she saw his face. "Baby, what happened?" Zaire dropped his backpack and fell to his knees beside her chair, burying his face in her lap like he used to do when he was little. Her hands, thin but still strong, stroked his hair as he told her everything. When he finished, silence filled the small apartment. Then Gran said something that surprised him. "Your daddy would be proud." Zaire looked up. "Proud? Gran, I lost my job. I can't pay for your medicine. I'll have to drop out of night classes. How could he be proud of that?" She touched his cheek, her eyes fierce despite the tiredness in them. "Because you did what was right, not what was easy. Just like he taught you. But, no buts." She turned the photo album toward him. "Look here." The page showed his father with a basketball team of skinny teenagers. One of them was circled in faded red ink. "Your daddy coached so many kids," Gran said softly. "Some of them went on to do amazing things. He always said the game wasn't about winning. It was about building character." Zaire's phone buzzed again in his pocket. He ignored it. "You should answer that," Gran said. "Might be important." It's probably just more rejection emails. But he pulled out the phone anyway. 3 missed calls from unknown numbers, 15 text messages from Marcus, and dozens of notifications from social media. His hands started shaking. Again, as he read Marcus's texts. "Security footage leaked online. Everyone's talking about you helping KD Sports blogs picking up the story. Stand with Zaire, trending in Brooklyn. Oh no, Zaire groaned. The last thing he needed was to become some viral sensation. He clicked one of the links Marcus sent. The video showed him giving Durant the shoes, captured from the security camera. But people weren't mocking him. They were defending him. Comments poured in about corporate policies versus human decency, about doing the right thing, about standing up for what you believe in. His phone buzzed with another message from the mysterious number. Some lessons are worth more than a job. Then, check your email. Zaire opened his email, expecting another rejection. Instead, he found an invitation that made his heart stop. Community Center Board meeting tomorrow. 9 a.m. special guest. Kevin Durant topic. Youth Basketball Initiative attendance. Requested, Zaire Jackson. "What is it, baby?" Gran asked, seeing his expression. But before he could answer, another coughing fit seized her, worse than before. She doubled over, struggling to catch her breath. The wheezing sound in her chest was terrifying. "Gran!" He rushed to get her water, his mind racing. The medicine. She needed her medicine. But he'd just lost his job. And the prescription cost. His phone lit up with another message. "Your father never gave up. Neither should you." Zaire looked at his grandmother, still fighting for breath, then at the mysterious invitation on his phone. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. He had no idea what it meant, but right now, he'd try anything. He just hoped he wasn't walking into another heartbreak. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Zaire sat beside Gran's bed until her breathing settled, counting each shallow breath. The nebulizer he'd borrowed from their neighbor helped a little, but it wasn't enough. She needed her proper medication. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing. The story had exploded online after major sports networks picked it up. Marcus kept sending him screenshots. Integrity over policy. Young employee fired for helping NBA star. Durant's mystery. Helper. The story behind the viral video. Stand with Zaire trends nationwide as fans rally behind fired worker around midnight, his old high school. Basketball coach called, "Zaire, my boy, I just saw the news. That was you? James's son?" "Yeah, Coach Williams. That was me. Your father would have done the exact same thing." The coach's voice softened. "Listen, I know some people. Let me make some calls." "Thanks, Coach," Zaire cut in. "But I've got this meeting tomorrow. At the community center. The one with Durant? It's all over Twitter. Kid, something big is happening here." Zaire glanced at Gran's sleeping form. "I just hope it's something good." After hanging up, he checked the viral video again. Someone had added dramatic music and slow motion to the security footage. The comments section was overflowing. "This kid chose helping others over keeping his job. We need more people like this. Whoever fired him should be ashamed. Rules without compassion aren't justice. Hey, AKD Tray 5, you gonna help this guy out?" But it was the local comments that hit hardest. People from his neighborhood, sharing stories. "That's James Jackson's boy. His dad used to coach my son. Taught him everything about basketball and life." The Jackson family's good people. His grandmother helped my mama when she was sick. Time to return the favor. "I'm calling the Barclays Center tomorrow. This ain't right." Zaire's vision blurred with tears. He hadn't known so many people remembered his father, remembered their family. Around 2 a.m., his former co-workers started reaching out. First, Tommy, the security guard. "Kid, you did the right thing. We're all talking about it. Even Mr. Peterson looks uncomfortable with how this went down." Then, Sarah from concessions. That was the most honest thing I've seen anyone do here. We've got your back, Zaire. Even the cleaning staff supervisor, Mr. Rodriguez, who barely spoke to anyone, sent a message. Your father coached my daughter's team 10 years ago. She's in college now, still plays basketball, still remembers what he taught her about integrity. 30. Each message felt like a tiny flame, pushing back the darkness of his situation. But doubt still gnawed at him. Nice words wouldn't pay Gran's medical bills. Marcus called at sunrise. Bro, you watching the morning sports shows? They're all talking about you. Zaire, who hadn't slept at all, turned on the TV. His story was everywhere. Sports commentators debated corporate policies versus human judgment. Former players shared stories about equipment managers who'd helped them. Someone had even dug up an old photo of his father coaching youth basketball. This is crazy, Zaire muttered. Crazy good, Marcus sounded excited. You know what this means? Durant's people had to have seen all this. That meeting today, it's not random. Maybe. Zaire watched Gran stirring in her sleep. Or maybe they just want to tell me in person not to talk to the media. Oh, man, why you always gotta be so negative? This could be your moment. My moment. Zaire's voice cracked. I lost my job, Marcus. Gran's getting worse. I can't even afford... He stopped, swallowing hard. Can't afford what? Marcus paused. Wait, is it her medicine? Bro, let me help. I got some savings. No. Zaire's tone was firm. You're saving that for your mom's operation. But I said no. He softened his voice. Thanks, though. Really. After hanging up, Zaire got ready for the meeting. He put on his one good shirt, the blue one Gran had ironed for job interviews. His father's Nets cap sat on the table, but he left it there. This wasn't a time for luck. This was a time for truth. Gran woke as he was leaving. Baby? Her voice was weaker than yesterday. You got everything you need? He looked at her. This tiny woman who'd raised him after losing her only son, who'd worked 2 jobs to put food on their table, who'd never once complained about her own pain. Yeah, Gran. I got everything that matters right here. She smiled, understanding in her eyes. Your daddy used to say that too. As Zaire walked to the community center, his phone buzzed one last time. The mysterious number again. Some dreams cost everything. Some are worth even more. The community center loomed ahead, its brick walls painted with fading murals of children playing. A small crowd of reporters had gathered outside, cameras ready. Zaire took a deep breath, thinking of his father's words about integrity, about doing what's right, thinking of Gran's smile this morning, brave despite her pain. Thinking of all the messages from people who remembered their family, who believed in him. He squared his shoulders and walked toward the door. Whatever waited inside, good or bad, he'd face it with the same integrity that had gotten him here. The door opened before he reached it, and there in the doorway stood Kevin Durant. Been waiting for you, Zaire Jackson, Durant said softly. We've got a lot to talk about. Zaire never made it to that meeting. Just as Kevin Durant opened his mouth to speak again, Zaire's phone rang. The screen showed his elderly neighbor's number, Mrs. Chen, who sometimes checked on Gran while he was out. His heart stopped when he heard her panicked voice. Zaire, your grandmother. She collapsed. The ambulance is coming. The world tilted, sideways. He vaguely heard himself apologizing to Durant, barely registered the superstar's concerned expression. Then he was running, pushing past reporters, their questions fading into white noise behind him. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of hospital corridors and mounting bills. Gran's pneumonia had gotten worse, much worse. The doctors said she needed stronger medication, longer observation. Each day added more charges to their growing debt. Zaire slumped in the hard plastic chair beside Gran's hospital bed, watching her chest rise and fall with the help of oxygen. The viral story about him had faded from the news, replaced by newer dramas. The mysterious texts had stopped. Whatever opportunity had waited at that community center was gone. Marcus visited every day, bringing coffee and job listings. "Security guard at the mall," he said, pointing to one advertisement. "Or here, night shift at the warehouse. The pay's not great, but I applied already," Zaire cut in. "To both, and 20 others this week." He rubbed his tired eyes. Nobody wants to hire the guy who went viral for breaking rules. The rejection emails had gotten creative in their wording, but the message was always the same. Too much publicity, too much risk. Gran stirred in her sleep, mumbling something, probably dreaming about Dad again. She'd been talking about him more lately, mixing up past and present in her fevered state. Zaire's hand went to his pocket, feeling the smooth metal of his father's championship ring, the one from his college days. The pawn shop would give him enough for another week of Gran's treatment. He'd been avoiding it, but now... "Don't even think about it," Marcus said, catching the gesture. "Here." He pulled out an envelope. "It's not much, but no." Zaire pushed it back without looking inside. "That's your mom's surgery money." "Oh, my. Mom's surgery isn't for 6 months. Your grandmother needs help now." "Marcus, please." Zaire's voice cracked. "I can't." His friend's face softened. "At least let me help with the night classes. You can't drop out now. You're so close." "Already did." "Wait." Zaire pulled out the withdrawal confirmation email. "Got the refund this morning. It'll cover about 3 days of Gran's new medication." Marcus swore softly, then pulled out his phone. "My uncle knows some people at the hospital. Maybe we can work out a payment plan. Already tried." Zaire gestured to the stack of papers on the bedside table. "They want half up front." The silence that followed was heavy with helplessness. Outside the window, the Brooklyn sky was turning orange with sunset. Another day ending, another bill growing. Gran's monitors beeped steadily, the sound drilling into Zaire's skull. He'd memorized all the numbers on the screens, learned what each beep and whistle meant. The nurses had started treating him like part of the furniture, working around him as he sat there hour after hour. "Remember what Coach Williams used to say?" Marcus asked suddenly. "The game's not over till the final buzzer." "This isn't a game." Zaire's voice was hollow. "And even if it was, I'm pretty sure the buzzer rang when I missed that meeting with Durant." His phone lay dead on the table. He'd stopped charging it days ago. What was the point? The world had moved on to new stories, new dramas. His moment of viral fame hadn't changed anything real. The ring felt heavier in his pocket. His father had worn it every day while coaching, would touch it for luck before every game. "Remember, son," he'd say, "sometimes you have to lose everything to gain." "What matters most?" Zaire pulled out the ring, watching it catch the last rays of sunlight. The inscription inside was worn but still readable. "Character over victory." "I'm sorry, Dad," he whispered. "I tried." Just then, Gran's eyes fluttered open. "Baby?" Her voice was faint behind the oxygen mask. "Why do you look so sad?" "I'm not sad, Gran." He forced a smile. "Just tired." She reached for his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Your father," he would say, "keep your head up. The game's not over." Zaire blinked back tears. Even now, she was trying to encourage him. A nurse appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Jackson, there's a call for you at the front desk. They say it's urgent." "Go," Marcus said. "I'll stay with her." Zaire walked to the desk, his father's ring still clutched in his hand. Maybe it was another debt collector, or someone else offering empty sympathy. But when he picked up the phone, the voice on the other end made his knees weak. "Zaire, this is Kevin Durant. We need to finish our conversation." Zaire gripped the phone tighter, his father's ring pressing into his palm. "Mr. Durant, I'm sorry about missing the meeting, but my grandmother—" "I know," Durant cut in gently. "We've been keeping tabs on you. The hospital's billing department just called me. Everything's taken care of." "What?" Zaire's legs gave out, and he sank into the desk chair. "I don't understand." "Meet me at the community center. Same one as before. I'll be there in 20 minutes. But Gran, Marcus will stay with her. Trust me, Zaire. It's time you learned the truth." The line went dead. Zaire stared at the phone, his mind spinning. The billing department? Keeping tabs on him? What truth? He glanced back toward Gran's room, where Marcus was telling her one of his funny stories, making her smile despite the oxygen mask. His friend caught his eye and nodded, as if he somehow knew what was happening. The evening air felt thick as Zaire walked to the community center. The same brick building, the same fading murals. But this time, no reporters crowded the entrance. Just a single figure waiting in the shadows. Kevin Durant. "Thanks for coming," Durant said, opening the door. "There's someone else who wants to meet you." They walked through the empty hallways, their footsteps echoing. Photos lined the walls. Basketball teams from years past, trophies, newspaper clippings. Zaire's steps slowed as he recognized faces in the older pictures. "Wait!" He stopped, in front of one photo, his heart pounding. That's my dad!" The picture showed his father, much younger, standing next to a skinny teenage boy. Both were grinning, holding up a trophy. "First championship I ever won," Durant said quietly. Zaire's head snapped up. "What?" Durant touched the photo gently. "Your father was my first real coach, back when I was just a tall, skinny kid from Maryland with big dreams. He saw something in me that nobody else did. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. But he never said he wouldn't have. James wasn't about taking credit. He was about building character." Durant smiled. "Sound familiar?" They continued, walking, reaching a small office at the end of the hall. Inside, an elderly man sat behind a desk, his dark skin wrinkled with age, but his eyes sharp and bright. "Zaire Jackson," the man said, standing slowly. "I've been waiting a long time to meet you. I'm Coach Thompson." Zaire's breath caught. He knew that name. His father had mentioned it countless times. His own mentor, the man who'd taught him everything about coaching. "Please, sit." Coach Thompson gestured to a chair. "We have much to discuss." Durant closed the door, leaning against it as Coach Thompson pulled out an old leather folder. "Your father was my best student," the old coach said, opening the folder. He understood that basketball isn't just about putting a ball through a hoop. It's about building character, making choices, standing up for what's right. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. Zaire recognized his father's handwriting immediately. "When the time comes, give this to my son." With trembling hands, Zaire unfolded the letter. "Dear Zaire, if you're reading this, then you've already learned the lesson I wanted to teach you most. That integrity matters more than rules. That helping others matters more than helping yourself. Coach Thompson and Kevin will know when you're ready. The community center needs someone like you, son. Someone who sees beyond the game. Someone who can teach the next generation what really matters. The position is yours, if you want it. Coach Thompson will show you the way, just like he showed me. Remember, character over victory. Love, Dad. Zaire looked up, his vision blurring. I don't understand. What position? Program director, Durant said, stepping forward. We're launching a youth basketball initiative. Full scholarship for you to finish your degree. Salary enough to take care of your grandmother's medical bills, and a chance to continue your father's legacy. Coach Thompson pulled out another document. Your father and I planned this years ago. We've been watching you, waiting to see if you had his heart. That day with Kevin's shoes, that was your test. You chose helping others over following rules, just like your father would have. The mysterious texts? Zaire asked. That was me, Durant admitted. Had to keep you hoping. Keep you fighting. Just like your dad did for me when I was ready to quit. Zaire looked down at his father's ring, still clutched in his hand. All this time, he thought he'd lost everything. But maybe his father had been right. Sometimes you have to lose everything to gain what matters most. So, Coach Thompson said, his eyes twinkling, are you ready to make your father proud? Zaire opened his mouth to answer, but suddenly his phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Gran's awake. Doctor says her numbers are improving. They can't explain it, but the billing department just called. Everything's cleared. Everything. What did you do? Zaire looked at Durant, who gave a small nod. Then he looked at his father's letter again, at the words that had guided him even when he didn't know it, at the legacy waiting to be continued. Through his tears, Zaire smiled. When do I start? News of the Kevin Durant Youth Basketball Initiative exploded across social media the next morning. Sports networks rushed to cover the story. But this time, Zaire wasn't just a viral moment, he was the headline. Viral hero becomes program director. Kevin Durant launches youth initiative. Like father, like son, the Jackson legacy continues, from fired to fired up. How one act of integrity changed everything. Zaire sat beside Gran's hospital bed, reading. Her, the articles from his new laptop, a welcome gift from the program. Her oxygen mask was gone, replaced by a small nasal tube, and color had returned to her cheeks. See, baby? She squeezed his hand. I told you, your daddy was watching over. You! Marcus burst into the room waving his phone. Bro, have you seen the registration numbers? Over 300 kids signed up in the first hour. Zaire shook his head, still amazed by how quickly everything had changed. Just yesterday, he'd been pawning his father's ring. Now, the ring sat proudly on his finger, right where it belonged. 30:20, door opened again, and Kevin Durant ducked his tall frame through the entrance. Mrs. Jackson, he said, smiling at Gran. The nurses tell me you'll be ready for discharge tomorrow. Thanks to you, she replied, her eyes misty. No, Durant shook his head. Thanks to your son and your husband. Everything I am today started with Coach Jackson believing in a skinny kid who couldn't even make his middle school team. A nurse appeared with discharge papers and a bag of medication, all paid for through the program's health insurance. As she explained the follow-up care instructions, Zaire's phone buzzed with an email from his night school. Withdrawal cancellation. Your tuition has been reinstated through the Durant Scholarship Program. Classes resume next week. Everything was falling into place so perfectly, it almost felt unreal. but something still nagged at the back of Zair's mind. Later that afternoon, at the community center, Coach Thompson watched as Zaire organized the IKP equipment room. They'd spent hours discussing training programs, mentorship strategies, and community outreach plans. "Something's bothering you," the old coach observed. Zaire paused, a basketball in his hands. "It's just, why all the secrecy? The mysterious texts, the test with the shoes? Why not just tell me about my dad's connection to KD?" Coach Thompson's eyes twinkled. "Would you have believed it? Or would you have thought we were just helping you because of your father? I guess your father wanted you to earn this on your own merits, to prove to yourself what kind of man you are." He picked up an old photo from his desk, Zaire's father with his first youth team. James believed that character reveals itself in the choices we make when we think nobody's watching. A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window, they could see kids gathering on the basketball court. Their first group of program participants. "They're early," Zaire said, checking his watch. "Eager to meet their new coach." Coach Thompson smiled. "Just like another group of kids was eager to meet your father 20 years ago." Zaire walked out to the court, where dozens of young faces turned toward him. Some he recognized from the neighborhood, others were new. All of them waiting, hoping, dreaming. "Welcome," he said, his father's ring catching the sunlight. "Who's ready to learn about more than just basketball?" The kids crowded around him, their energy infectious. As he demonstrated the first drill, the same one his father had taught him, he noticed Durant and Coach Thompson watching from the doorway, both smiling. Marcus, now the program's assistant director, started dividing the kids into groups. "Just like old times," he said, bumping Zaire's fist. "Except now, we're the ones doing the teaching." The afternoon flew by in a blur of squeaking sneakers, bouncing balls, and young voices calling his name. "Coach Jackson! Coach Jackson!" It felt strange being called that, his father's title, but right somehow, like putting on a favorite old jacket and finding it fits perfectly. As the last kids left for the day, Durant approached him. "There's one more thing you should know," he said, his expression unreadable. "About that day with the shoes." But before he could finish, Zaire's phone rang. Gran was calling from home, her first day back from the hospital. "Everything okay, Gran?" "Perfect, baby. I found something you need to see, in your daddy's old coaching box. Can it wait? I'm just finishing up here. Trust me, Zaire. You're going to want to see this." Something in her voice made him pause. He looked at Durant, who nodded mysteriously. "Go," Durant said. "Some answers are worth waiting for." Zaire gathered his things, his mind racing. What had Gran found? Why did Durant look like he knew something? And why did he suddenly feel like he was still missing a crucial piece of the Eat-I-Gib puzzle? As he left the community center, the setting sun painted the basketball court in shades of gold. A single ball had been left behind, sitting at half court. He picked it up, feeling the familiar texture under his fingers. His father's voice seemed to whisper in his head, "The game's not over yet, son." And somehow, Zaire knew that tomorrow would bring one final revelation. One that would change everything he thought he knew about that day with the shoes. When Zaire arrived home, Gran was sitting in her chair, an old cardboard box open at her feet. Her hands cradled a worn leather journal. "Your daddy's coaching diary," she said, holding it out. He wrote in it every day, about his players, his dreams for them. Look at the last entry. Zaire took the journal, his heart pounding. The final page was dated just 2 days before the accident. "Met with KD and Coach T today. Everything set for when Zaire's ready. The community center program, the scholarship, all of it. But he has to earn it his own way, has to prove he has the heart for it. KD suggested a test, something to show Zaire's true character. Maybe something with equipment, a choice between rules and doing right. Coach T will know when the time comes. My son has greatness in him, not the kind that wins games, but the kind that changes lives. When he proves it to himself, the program will be his legacy to build. Until then, we wait and watch, and hope he remembers what I taught him about integrity. Zaire's hands shook. The shoes. It was all planned? Years ago? Not exactly. Kevin Durant's voice came from the doorway. He and Coach Thompson stood there, having followed him home. The specific situation wasn't planned, Coach Thompson explained, entering the apartment. But the test, showing your character through a choice about equipment, that was your father's idea. When you started working at Barclays Center, we knew the time was coming. Those weren't really charity event shoes, were they? Zaire asked, finally understanding. Durant shook his head. They were just regular practice shoes. The whole charity event tag was fake. We needed to create a situation where you'd have to choose between following rules and helping someone. The security. Footage leak? The viral story? All part of the plan, Coach Thompson smiled. We needed the world to see what we already knew, that you were your father's son. But my job, getting fired, had to be real, Durant said. Had to hurt, had to cost you something. Just like tough choices always do. Your father believed that true character shows itself not just in making the right choice, but in being willing to pay the price for it. Gran was crying softly in her chair. James knew, she said. He knew you'd choose. Helping others, just like he always did. Zaire looked down at his father's journal, then at the ring on his finger. All this time I thought I was following in his footsteps. But really, he was laying them out for me. Not exactly, Coach Thompson said. He gave you the path, but you chose to walk it. That choice was all yours. And now? Zaire asked. Durant gestured to the window, where they could see kids already gathering at the community center's court across the street. Now, you make your own path. Build your own legacy. Zaire stood, his father's journal clutched to his chest. Through the window, the morning sun painted the basketball court in shades of promise. Those kids were waiting for their coach, waiting for him to teach them what his father had taught him. That character matters more than victory. That integrity has its own rewards. That sometimes the biggest dreams come disguised as the hardest choices. Well then, he said, picking up his father's old whistle from the box. Let's not keep them waiting. As he walked toward the door, Gran called out softly, "Baby, your daddy was right about you. About everything." Zaire smiled, tears in his eyes. Yes, his father had been right. About the choices we make. About the price of integrity. About the legacy we leave. And about one more thing. Sometimes you have to lose everything to gain what matters most. Just like Zaire showed us, a single act of kindness can change lives in ways we never expect. Sometimes the smallest choices have the biggest impact. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below. Each comment reminds me that stories like Zaire's connect us all, no matter where we're from. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button. Your simple click helps spread these messages of integrity and kindness to others who might need to hear them today. And if you're looking for more stories that inspire, check out the video appearing on your screen right now. I think you'll find it just as moving as Zair's journey. Remember, sometimes doing the right thing costs everything, but it's always worth it in the end.